Record. Hi, everyone. My name is Javon Edwards, pronouns she, her, hers. I am the Associate Director of School Services overseeing all things outreach and recruitment within UC Santa Barbara's Office of Admissions. Thank you so much, you all, for joining another counselor webinar, which is advising our first year applicants on the waitlist and appeal process. So I really, really appreciate you all at this time, especially as you're advising your students, both students that have been admitted, students that have been waitlisted, and students potentially that have been denied. I know that it is challenging times for us all as we navigate through this, and also exciting for those students that have been admitted. So for today's agenda, of course, I'm going to reintroduce, our team, just so you know the faces of our outreach and recruitment team on the first year side. We're going to talk about first year decisions. There were three types of decisions your students can have and would have received as of yesterday. That was admitted, that was waitlisted, and that was denied. We're going to talk about our new applicant portal, and then we're going to go into the nitty-gritty of today's session, and that is our waitlist process and expectations that you can share out with your students, as well as our appeals process. Of course, I leave you with some resources for yourselves and other resources that you can share out with your students. So once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. We cannot thank you enough from the bottom of our hearts and from the whole admissions team. I appreciate, as always, your collaboration. That collaboration is year round. It does not stop from us being able to visit with your students, either in person or at a virtual capacity, to be able to support your students as they're applying to not just UC Santa Barbara, but through the UC system, for you encouraging your students to apply to our campus. And then you continue to advocate for your students after they've received their admission decision and beyond. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really know that, helping students navigate through the admission process itself is difficult. It's tough. And so we do appreciate you taking that time and really just championing for your students. So we do recognize that this is a very exciting time for some and many of your students that have received their admission decisions to some of the campuses that they were really, really going for, their campus choices. And this is also a difficult time for some of those students that have not gotten into their first choice campus, and that might be UC Santa Barbara. So with myself and, led by our executive director, Kuka Acosta, as well as the rest of the first year freshman admissions team, we can relate and we understand and we know that it is emotionally draining, especially this time in March and into April, as you're navigating through some of those tough conversations and with the very large caseload that you do have. So I do want to say again, once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. As you're working with your students, whether they've been admitted, waitlisted, and or denied, you can always refer them to our Meet Your Counselor page. That QR code is on the screen. I'll also ask my colleague Kennedy today to add that link into the chat for folks to reference. That is going to be where students can find who their assigned counselor is. It might be myself, it might be Kennedy, it might be Julian, Gia, Silali, Yuriko, excuse me, I almost choked on that one. But we're here to help you and your students, of course, on any questions that they do have. So, yesterday, which is probably why I am tongue-tied today, we released admission decisions for the fall of 2026 cycle. And I know that you all are here to understand numbers and data and what happened and why it happened and all of that. And hopefully, I'll be able to provide some insight as much as I'm able to share about some of those data points. So yesterday at about 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we released decisions for all 108,000 roughly students that applied to UC Santa Barbara for that fall 2026 cycle. Now, as of today, because things are always moving and grooving within the world of admissions, and as we continue to release admission decisions, thinking of students that have been waitlisted or potentially students that submit a successful appeal, as of today, we have about 38% admission rate. And some of you are like, what? 38% for UCSB? Wow, that is trending on the higher percentage side than previous years. And those assumptions are indeed correct. So with that 38%, if you want to do the math of about 108,000 applications, that's about 41,000 students that have been admitted. Now, while we have that 38% admission rate just for all of the 108,000 students that applied, as you can probably guess, for engineering, that admission rate is lower, right? And it is going to be even more lower for our extremely selective College of Creative Studies. Now, for College of Engineering, College of Creative Studies, those are going to continue to trend as selective. College of Creative Studies, as you may or may not know, faculty reviews students and their supplemental materials. They also have a say on who gets admitted. College of Engineering, we are pre-screening students for mathematics, that they at least had a pre-calculus or higher by their senior year as one of those factors. So those are going to continue to have a decrease in terms of the admission rate, just those colleges alone. As a reminder, for College of Engineering, we do have 5 majors: electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, computer science, and computer engineering. Those are the 5. If you haven't heard it already in the grapevine, that we are going to get a new major in the College of Engineering, that is artificial intelligence. That will be on the UC application in fall 2027. So for those students that are applying, my juniors right now that will be applying in their senior year this fall, they can apply to the artificial intelligence major in the College of Engineering. And as you probably guessed it, it's still going to be competitive for admission. Now, outside of College of Engineering and the College of Creative Studies, College of Letters and Science only has 2 majors that are considered selective, and that's because there's a supplemental application that is dance and music. I just want to remind folks that for College of Letters and Science, we don't admit by major. And so therein, that college is not going to be selective for admission outside of dance and music. In terms of additional stats, and I'll talk a little bit more about majors in a little bit, some of our top majors into College of Letters and Science, although again, major not a factor. But for data points in terms of GPA, so the UC GPA, as a reminder, UC GPA is looking at 10th and 11th grade A through G courses, only grades received in those A through G courses between 10th and 11th grade. It is capped at 8 semesters of weighted coursework being AP, IB, honors, college level coursework. You know this. That average UC GPA of admitted students for this cycle was about a 4.17, and that is trending on the same average UC GPA as last year. For those of you working with students that are not attending a school where they weight the GPA, the unweighted average GPA was about a 3.91. So our students that have applied and been admitted are fantastic. They are really, really walking on water. They're amazing. Now, a handful of students did receive an admission offer, and I said that handful, right, being right around that 40,000 mark, 41,000 if we want to be specific. So those students have several different tabs, and if you don't know already, we actually have a brand new portal, which we've seen a lot of excitement on social media from students that have received an admission decision to UC Santa Barbara, and the layout and look of it is completely different than previous years. So you might not have seen it, but you can see some screenshots on our screen currently. Now, this is going to be a portal layout of a student that has been admitted into the university. And we're going to do a different screenshots for each kind of different applicant status for waitlist, denied, and then of course admitted, which we're on. Now, the students that have been admitted, they're going to see a couple of different things in the My Tasks tab, My Tasks tab, say it a couple times. And that is going to be one, acknowledging their financial aid information. So for the students that you're advising that have been admitted, just FYI, we are going to be able to provide their financial aid packages. The goal is by Friday by our Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships, as they have promised us that it should be ready by Friday. But we're encouraging students to absolutely check back Friday, if not by next week, for their financial aid award letters to be reviewed. We're also encouraging students still, if they haven't completed a FOSFA or a CADA application, go ahead and do so. The priority deadline was March 2nd for UC schools, but if they haven't submitted that FOSFA or CADA application, please encourage them to do so, as we do have aid available, although priority consideration will be given to students that submitted their FOSFA and CADA applications on time by that UC March 2nd deadline. There's also a checklist item for students to share the parents and supporters page with their family. If you haven't checked out our parents and supporters page, I'm going to ask my colleague Kennedy to go ahead and share out that page just for your reference. We are going to have parent chats. So we really want to be able to engage with some of the parents that have been admitted. And so that, we know that parents have the most questions about next steps. And so we're going to have a few open chats where our campus partners from housing and orientation and student health services will be providing some insight about next steps. So you can see all of the different checklist items that are available for students. And as they go through the process of potentially deciding to commit to UCSB, we're encouraging them to register for admitted student events, to check out that supporters page so they can share out upcoming events for families. But they really truly don't have any true next steps until they submit their SIR. So for those students that have been admitted into the university through regular admission decisions, they have until May 1st to determine if they would like to commit to enrolling to our campus in the fall. And so a step in completing their SIR or statement of intent to register, if they say yes, is going to be paying the $250 SIR fee in the UCSB applicant portal. So it's a part of the SIR steps. Now, after they do complete the SIR, their task list here is actually going to update, and it's going to have tasks like reviewing the conditions of their admission. Now that they've said yes, they're coming, they need to make sure that they are going to continue to be eligible for that conditional admission by making sure that they're submitting their transcripts, they're submitting their exam scores, they are doing all of the tasks that we ask for them to do in their applicant portal. We do encourage students, of course, to sign up for housing, although housing is not required at UCSB for incoming students, but it is going to be guaranteed their first year when they get into the university. So we encourage them, if they're interested in staying on campus, completing the housing application. We are also encouraging them to sign up for orientation over the summer, although again, not required, strongly encouraged. So there's going to be a lot of different steps for them to make their way to UCSB, and we're calling that the steps to enrollment. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen that kind of outlines some of those steps to enrollment to UC Santa Barbara. Now, additional pieces that your admitted students might want to consider is joining us for our virtual events. These are virtual webinars very similar to this one, where we have next steps for admitted first year students. We also have virtual open house events that they can partake in, campus tours. And so all of that is going to be available to them in their portal. And again, I know that this session is all about waitlists and appeals, but I want you all to know, because we have that new portal, I want you to take a look to see what it's going to look like for your students. And I know you're going to get questions about checklist items, so I'm happy to share a viewpoint of what our portal looks like at all levels, so all statuses. So let's talk about the wait list. All right. Now, every year, almost every year, but not always, a select number of students are going to be offered a spot on our UCSB waitlist. And while I know we love data points, I will not be disclosing how many students were offered a spot on the waitlist, but I can share that as of this morning, about half of the students that were offered a spot on the waitlist, they indeed opted in to the waitlist. And reality is that trends every single year. We get about half of the students opting in pretty much the day after decision release. And as you can probably guess, that number is going to increase over time. Now, students have not that much time. They have less than a month at this point to opt in and accept their waitlist offer. And they'll be opting in, of course, the UCSB portal. So what you're looking at now on the screen, you can see the very different layout. The tabs are not as intense. There's not as many. There's 4 different tabs for our waitlisted students. And so on the any of the portal pages, students are going to be able to see their admission status. They'll be able to see it in 2 different places on the right-hand side of their page, in addition to other details about their application and personal information, as well as right at the center of the page on their My Application tab. Most importantly, they're going to be seeing a very big submit your waitlist response call to action button. And so we are going to encourage them again at this point, if they are interested in being on the waitlist, that they are submitting their waitlist response by that April 15th date. Now, I feel like I say this year to year, so I apologize for repeating, and I know that many of you know this, but it is difficult to predict UCSB waitlist trends. I would say, arguably, maybe many university waitlist trends, right? It's difficult to predict it. I know you want the answers. I know your students wants the answers. What's the percentage of students that you're going to admit off the waitlist? And I cannot give you an answer, especially not the day after admission decisions had just released. It's really about students that were admitted into the university and whether or not they're going to SIR, that they're going to confirm that they will be here this fall. That is going to be one of the many predictors of whether or not we will go off of the wait list. So admit those students on to off the wait list in a regular admission status. Now, there's really just no way to pinpoint, again, how many students are going to be offered admission from the waitlist. This can be dependent on the major in which they apply to. Again, engineering is highly competitive. If your student was waitlisted for engineering, that means they're a fantastic student. We do want them, but at this time, we don't have space to move them into the major. So they're on the wait list, and that if a student that does an SAR that happens to be in computer science, they're just deciding not to come to UCSB, then hopefully that opens up a spot for that student on the wait list for computer science. It's also going to be dependent on, who is opting in to our wait list. I already mentioned that about half of the students that we offered a wait list spot have opted in, but it's also going to be about who is opting in based on what major or college. So there's, again, a lot of different variables, and it's also dependent on when students decide to SIR. If they decide to SIR at the very last minute, i.e. May 1st, well, then we are still trying to analyze the numbers of where we need to fill gaps. And so students that are on the wait list might not hear back about their admission decision until the summer months, beyond May, potentially June or July. And that's just the reality of the matter. So if you have a student that has been waitlisted, you have to have that conversation, and we can also have that conversation with them that we are going to encourage them to consider other university opportunities in which they have been admitted into the university, because we cannot predict when we will release their admission decision as either admit or unfortunately as either deny. Now, there's a couple pieces that I want to mention while also on the screen. While yes, we need students to take action of whether yes, they would like to stay on the wait list, or no, they already know that they're going to go somewhere else. Please have them take action, and have them take action by April 15th. If they do not take any action by April 15th, we are going to assume that they do not want to be on the wait list, and therefore we will place them as a rejection from the wait list. So that means that we are not going to wait for them. Unfortunately, we're just going to move forward. So no action ultimately is truly action if they do not do anything by that April 15th date. If a student does decline the waitlist offer, let's say they declined it today and then they changed their mind, and a week from now they decide they now want to stay on the waitlist for UCSB, we will not reverse that decision. They cannot change their answer in the applicant portal, and we will not accept a reversal if they email us. So it is a final decision that they are making. And then students who were not offered on the space on the wait list, they cannot be petitioned to be on the wait list. So if you are working with any student that has been denied and they are interested on just maybe UCSB can take me and put me on the wait list, that will not be the case. Now, I'm going to go ahead and transition, but your students might have questions about next steps and or why were they waitlisted. Our new portal seemingly has it all. It's going to also have a while I wait tab, and the while I wait tab will direct them and encourage them to sign up for our virtual events. Virtual events are going to be overviews very similar to this one so that they know next steps if they would like to confirm their waitlist offer. It is going to be available for students on their portal to sign up for these virtual events, but I do want to really make it clear that if a student has signed up for our virtual events because they're interested in learning next steps, but maybe they're also interested in thinking that we do consider demonstrated interest, that's not going to be the case. If they've attended or registered a webinar, it's not going to have any bearing on their admission decision. The session really is simply to provide the student with access to to getting their questions answered live by an admissions counselor, such as myself or colleagues. And it's also an opportunity for them to feel heard, right? We want to create space for students to vent, to let us know the questions that they have about next steps. And so we do have those virtual events available. Now, on the portal page as well, we'll have some commonly asked questions. So FAQs, what is the wait list? Why was I on the wait list? Can I appeal to be off of the wait list? The answer is no, you cannot appeal to be off the wait list. But we also have a wait list FAQ page as well. So while these are very common questions, if student doesn't see the question that they have listed, they can also go to our waitlist webpage, which I will show you now, which has additional frequently asked questions. And you can see the list here, right? When and how will I find out if I get an offer of admissions? Well, I just let you all know it's going to vary and it's really dependent on several different factors. They have a question about continued interest. Can I submit a letter of continued interest? And the answer is sure, they can, but similar to registering for virtual events or, coming to our campus for a tour, it's not going to help them in terms of an admission decision. As a baseline, we do not consider demonstrated interest at all for admissions, and letters of continued interest, attending a campus tour, it's all to demonstrate that interest, and it's not something that we will consider to move them off of the wait list. Now, we do encourage students to still explore UCSB. Yes, they are invited to come to campus to do a tour. Yes, they're invited to open house because there's a possibility that they will be admitted off of the wait list, and we want them to be informed of what our campus resources are and next steps. So this is why we are offering those opportunities. Now, let's go ahead and kind of talk through. I know that this is all about first years, but I want to make sure that it is clear that there are going to be two different deadlines out there if you're working with both first years and transfer students. So for first year students, the opt-in deadline, as mentioned before, is April 15th. If you're working with any transfer students, well, we have not released admission decisions for transfers. We're going to release admission decisions in mid-April. And so at that point, if the student has been put on the wait list, then they'll be able to accept their offer on the wait list, and they need to do so by May 15th. A few additional common questions that we typically receive and also bulleted on the screen. Can waitlisted students appeal? The answer is no. If they are denied, they may not appeal to be on the wait list, excuse me. So this is definitely a common question that we have. Can waitlisted students appeal to be admitted? They cannot appeal because they don't have a decision. If a student is denied, they can appeal. Um, Another piece that folks need to keep in mind is if at the conclusion of the waitlist process, students are not offered admission, so they do have a decision of denied, then at that point, they will have the opportunity to appeal. That appeal window is typically 5 to 7 days. I think this year we are leaning towards 5 days. So as soon as a student receives their decision, then at that point, they can submit an appeal, but a waitlist decision is not a true decision. There is not a ranking to the waitlist. We get this question quite frequently, so we do not rank students on the waitlist. We know that students on the waitlist are considered academically strong candidates. That's why we are putting them on the waitlist, but there is no true ranking. Again, there's multiple variables, one of those variables being the college that the student applied into and the major itself. An admission decision for waitlisted students ultimately has already been completed. So we're not going to go back and review a student's application. If a student is submitting additional materials to kind of plead their case on why they should be selected off of the waitlist, we're not going to add that into consideration. That goes back to the continued interest conversation. In terms of financial aid as well, students will be able to receive a financial aid award letter after they have opted into the waitlist. So if your student has opted into the waitlist already, as mentioned before, for our regular admits and regular admission decisions, all students should be able to receive a financial aid offer by next week. So they should check back in their portal. If a student has opted into the waitlist, it'll be the same conversation. They'll be able to view that next week. All right. Moving right along, as a reminder, if you do have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A. And thank you so much, Kennedy, for adding several different resources into the chat. Now, accepting a spot on the wait list, so we are going to have an 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on that April 15th date. So students do need to make sure that they're indicating that they would like to be on the wait list by that time. And then I'm going to go ahead now at this point, transition. So what happens if a student has opted into the wait list and they find out later down the line, that's likely going to be after that May 1st SIR deadline, that they have not been selected to UCSB admission, that they've been denied. Or a student has just yesterday found out that they have been denied to UCSB. Let's go ahead and talk about the appeals process, which again is a harder conversation to have with students that did not receive an offer. So I'll reiterate that we reviewed over about 108,000 first-year freshman applications for the class of for the class of 2026, so the application cycle 2026. And we were able to offer admission again to about 38% of those students. This is again higher than last year. So we did admit more students this year at the forefront, which is a good thing definitely for the waitlisted students. And it also might be a good thing for the students that submit a successful appeal. Now, because technically we are still in the process of providing, admission decisions to students on the wait list, and that rate, that 38% might increase and likely to increase for students that are admitted off the wait list and or submit a successful appeal. We need to just be mindful that we did a holistic review for students, all students that applied. And that holistic review was utilizing the 13 factors for admission. And this is something that all UC campuses can and do utilize. And so the 13 factors are on the screen. They're also on the QR code. So we are taking a look at academic considerations, students' GPA, their UC GPA, their rigorous courses that they're completing, that they're taking advantage of the opportunities available to them. And so each application reader has reviewed a student's application based on these parameters and these parameters alone. And for UCSB, we are reviewing all students' applications twice, one by an individual reader and one by somebody completely different. And if these two people don't have an agreement on where the student falls, it goes into a third read by a senior manager. So we are really doing a thorough review. And while we are looking at these 13 factors, I want to make it very clear what factors we are not looking at. So because of Prop 209, we do not consider race. We're not considering ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion for the basis of admission. and also for the basis of scholarships as a side note. But those factors will not be the reason why a student was denied to the university. Of course, there's information that we cannot view when reviewing the student's application, their first name, their last name, their email, some of those personal identifying factors. But what we absolutely can view are those academic and non-academic factors. And so UCSB faculty, UC faculty members have agreed upon the review factors that you're seeing on the screen for us to make our admission decisions. And so please, as you're sharing out information with students on potentially why or why not a student was admitted, know that we are looking at these 13 factors, but we are not looking at some of those identifying factors, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc., that I mentioned before. Now, if a student didn't get admitted into the university, and they're determining that yes, they would like to submit an appeal because they feel like within the UC application, in the activities and awards, the personal insight questions, that they were not able to accurately showcase or fully showcase their accomplishments, or maybe they forgot to include certain experiences or share additional context that's surrounding their academic standing, that's surrounding their family context or home life, then they do have that option to appeal. So again, looking at the portal, you will see that it is going to look completely different for students that were not offered admission, and it is going to have those four tabs at the very top. It will show their admission status and information about their next steps if they opt to appeal. So if a student does opt to appeal, they're going to navigate to the appeal processes tab, and you'll see very similar to the waitlist and or admitted students tabs for virtual events. We do have virtual events about next steps. So with that, our appeal process is going to open up April 1st. April 1st, okay? The way a student can appeal, and the only way a student can appeal, is through their UCSB applicant portal. But before they even click on the appeal button, when it becomes available on April 1st, is that they're reviewing the appeals webpage to get more information about what we are asking for from an appeal. We are really doing that very intentionally, in that we provided admission decisions yesterday on March 17th. And we are giving some time for students to sit and digest the decision that was provided and really think to themselves, do I want to submit an appeal? Do I have new and compelling information to share with the admissions office that was not already previously shared in my UC application? And on April 1st, if they decide that that is indeed the case and they've reviewed the appeals webpage and they've maybe attended one of these events, then they can go ahead and submit an appeal, and a different button that's not viewed on the screen currently will show where they can go ahead and move forward in that appeal process. So what are we looking for an appeals? Well, there are going to be two mandatory questions, and each has a 500 character limit. So there is also going to be a third optional question, and you can kind of see this here at the very bottom, but I'll go over the questions in a little bit. And so ultimately, what we're asking for question number one is, what is the basis of their appeal? Beyond really their desire to be at UCSB. Yes, yes, we know that they want to come to our campus. We get it. But what is the compelling basis for their appeal? Have they had an improvement in potentially fall grades, or have they had new activities since applying, or did they forget to list those activities in the UC application? Unfortunately, when reviewing some students' applications, I saw that they didn't even put activities and awards in the application in itself. And if that's the case, yeah, then they should probably go ahead and submit an appeal and let us know of that new information. So, question number one, what is the basis of their appeal? Question number two, again, all of these being under 500 characters, that's about 80 to 90 words, so it's not a lot of information, is what details or context was missing that would enhance our understanding of your or their accomplishments. So again, we are looking for new information that was not originally presented in their UC application. This is a great opportunity for students to clarify or add additional context of what was not shared in the application. As a reminder, students can log into the UC application, they can print out what they submitted in their application, and they can review, wow, I forgot to share this. I forgot to share that. I forgot to share X, Y, Z. And that might give them help with figuring out what they would like to share with the admissions office in the appeal. And then lastly, the optional question is, did your application correctly reflect what is on your transcript? If not, what was incorrect? So this is the opportunity if they forgot to list a class or they had edits to their grades, or maybe they, similar to vein edit to the grade, they listed a B, but in reality they got an A in pre-calculus. They would need to go ahead and let us know specifically about the academic updates regarding their transcript. For the optional question, if they opt to respond to the optional question, they are encouraged and should submit a transcript. Okay. Now, let's talk about basis of appeals and let's go a little bit further in depth with that. So, basis of appeals for academic inconsistencies, and at that point, they might maybe ask you for a transcript, and that's okay for you to share. Again, that is if they're going to be responding to question number 3, they can upload a transcript to our new portal. But it is going to be important for students to note that the review for the first year freshman appeals is not going to be focused on the changes to their senior grades. We're not going to be looking at their senior grades per se, because that's not what was originally reviewed in the UC application review process. So their senior year grades, if they did fantastic in their fall year, their fall year of senior year, they can go ahead and share that with us, but it's not going to be a compelling basis for an appeal. All right. Now, as a final reminder, there is that limit of 500 characters, and we really are looking for new information. So, how can you support your students through an appeal? As you advise your students, we really hope that you'll convey what may or may not make a good basis for an appeal. And so the first question for you and your student that you're revising is, should they appeal, right? I already mentioned earlier, but that desire, that want to be at UCSB is not a compelling and is not considered compelling information for the appeals committee. Now, I've seen a lot of appeals and a lot of students are just really expressing through 500 characters how much they want to be at UCSB, or that their friend or their cousin is at UCSB and that's why they want to join the UCSB community. That is not a good reason. My sister or brother goes to UCSB. I want to go to a campus with a beach. Not a great basis for an appeal at all. A better basis for an appeal that would actually have some merit to us is that there were UC application errors in that academic record. So as they were inputting their academic history, maybe they unfortunately misreported information that did not serve to their benefit. Additional context was not shared. Maybe that context is that they, were taking care of a parent or a grandparent that really impacted their academics during their junior year, and they did not share that information in the UC application, additional comments or PIQs. And so the application reader, while they might have seen that the student got a few C's, they really don't know why the student got a few C's. And that's that additional context layer that the student should have added in the application, but they didn't. And so that would be a good basis for an appeal to share with us about, again, those family circumstances or those additional commitments that a student had that might have impacted their academics or their opportunities to get involved. Okay. So students that are appealing on the basis of simply an application error, it likely is not going to be a good basis of an appeal for our office. But if the student is submitting appeal and they are trying to submit an appeal that would have some merit, they can go ahead and detail with us that maybe they were advised to report something that was incorrect, maybe through their parent. Of course, it would never be a counselor, but there's ways in which students can detail us that there was true application errors. It's not that they had an error in reporting, but maybe it was that there was an error on their transcript, and so they were just reporting exactly what was on their transcript. If they're repeating information in terms of what was already shared in the UC application, this is going to be highly discouraged and it's not going to be a good basis of an appeal. We're also not going to be considering letters of recommendation, so please do not have your students send them. Please do not complete a letter of recommendation for the basis of appeal. Please and thank you. No emails with that continued interest or demonstrated interest. No supporting documents, so no supplemental materials outside of transcripts as a PDF if they opt to upload transcripts. Now, appeals are going to be reviewed by senior admissions staff. I will give you context for last year. We had about 1,000 appeals last year. And so we went through those appeals, and I would say a few handful of students were successful in their appeal, right? And so it is not something that we take lightly, but usually we do not admit students off of the basis of an appeal frequently. It really has to be an outstanding appeal that is providing new and compelling information. So the appeals timeline, as mentioned before, appeals will be open and accessible on students' applicant portal on April 1st, and they have until the 15th to take action and to submit their appeal. Appeals, excuse me, there we go. So review of appeals typically by our office is going to take place usually in May. So this is really after that May 1st SIR deadline. And it's likely sometimes that we are going to continue to review appeals up until June. And this is really because our office is going to be also reviewing waitlisted students and understanding who can we admit off of the waitlist to fill some of those gaps. And then we're moving then to the appeal process. So the hierarchy in reality is, yep, we have students that were admitted. Is there additional space to admit more students beyond the SIR May 1st deadline? Do we have those gaps to fill? Yes. Then we're going to admit students off of the wait list. Do we still have room to admit additional students? Well, at that point, we're going to now look for new and compelling appeals and to fill those gaps. So again, admit, wait list, and then appeals. For appeal decisions, we will likely post them in late May, potentially even June, all the way into late August. So the timeline does go into the summer times, which might not be really great for students who really need to understand whether or not their appeal has been successful. So we are still going to encourage students that were denied that yes, you have the option to submit an appeal, but we also want you to consider the other university opportunities in which they have been admitted into the university. All right. For students, next steps, if they would like to, and I think my transition here was a little bit wonky, so let me move forward. If they would like to go ahead and submit an appeal, I went over this tab already. We're going to have those webinars on April 1 and April 13th, both at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. They need to log into their portal to go ahead and register, and that they are submitting that appeal by April 1st all the way through April 15th during our appeals window. All right, we made it through, and just a little bit time left to see if there were any questions that were not addressed. Once again, I'd really like to thank you all for your partnership. And as I mentioned earlier before, this is just a very busy time for everyone, but also a challenging time as we navigate the more challenging conversations for students that have been admitted, have been waitlisted and or denied. Now, before I get into questions, we do have additional resources that are available. So I really want to point to some of our upcoming counselor webinars. Tomorrow, we do have one for March 19th, UCSB Transfer Prep Programs on the 24th. Our wonderful executive director, Kuka Acosta, is going to be hosting an open chat with the director. These are going to be great opportunities for you to just hop in, say hi, how you doing, but also get some of your questions answered by our director. April 16th, we have the transfer pathway high school to community college to UC Santa Barbara. April 23rd, help. My student is trying to apply to a selective major. What are the alternative major options on April 23rd? I will ask you all, if you haven't already, save the date for UCSB's open house. It is Saturday, April 11th, 9 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on our beautiful campus. Please send your students to check out some of our resource and table fairs and academic services. There's going to be a plethora of events that are happening on our campus, workshops, faculty lectures, and more. So I encourage you and your students, of course, to come to our campus. But if you cannot visit, that's okay. I'm going to encourage you to attend our virtual open house. That is going to be from March 24th through April 23rd. We have an event almost every single day. These virtual events will be